welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trucked Before. Yeah, you knew it was coming. It's the finale. It's part 2 of 2. It's the search part 2. DS9 on It's All Been Trucked Before. Hey, you don't have to search hard for us on Facebook. It's All Been Trucked Before. Just like whatever got you here, look at the title, whatever you're looking at. It's the same thing on Facebook. Come find us there. Come talk to us. We're having fun out there. Hopefully making you laugh. Hopefully making you think. Tell us how we're doing. Especially if it's favorable, or just get in on the conversation. Talk about what you think of this episode or that episode. We love to get your feedback. Either way, follow us there. It's a lot of fun. And we're going to continue to follow here, The Search, Part 2 on It's All Been Trucked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trucked Before. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
And the guitar pick ship.
That's Keith. This is Jimmy-Jerome. We are here to talk The Search Part 2, First Impressions.
It reminded me of part 1 in some ways.
Maybe the title.
very search-like in some. Well, I think the first one was searchier than this one.
More of the same. I like this episode a lot. And you mentioned last week, Jimmy, that it definitely felt rushed or something like that, or just smushed. A lot going on very quickly, which I didn't really mind the pace. We'll talk about the ending because I feel good and bad about it, or I don't know if I mean the ending or the reveal, if you will.
Yes.
And again, I didn't see it coming. So
I didn't either.
From that perspective, it's pretty good.
With you, I'm probably wanted to say some of the same things, and I think it needed to be something that drastic to make some of these things work. And things that were starting to pile up that were bothering me that I didn't realize were bothering me. And some of that, again, was me going, what did I tune out too soon during this other thing, the first episode, or what happened? What did I miss? And that kind of feeling of that transition. And I kept like,
I will say this, if you're going to make an episode where at the end, it's like, guess what? It really didn't happen. And you're also going to make it a test by aliens. It better be a fun episode. And this was a good, fun episode. So yeah. We've watched a lot of crappy episodes with aliens testing people well, none of this happened. It stopped. And this one didn't. I enjoyed it. So it was good. Lots of good action. Lots going on.
Me knowing just the fact that the Dominion had something to do with the changelings, and them not indicating it for most of the episode was a little bit confusing, but I kept waiting for the shoe to drop that everyone had been replaced, essentially. I kept going, wait, but no, wait a minute. No, it makes sense. They're behaving the way they're supposed to in this situation. And they're behaving as though if they'd been replaced, they wouldn't care about this, or they would know that sort of thing. I kept doing that the entire episode. So
I will say that the Admiral and the other Federation guy were the two things where I'm like, okay, bugs are controlling them or something kind of non. I will say that. I did not expect the ending to be what it was.
I had forgotten the twist that was coming. I really thought Nechayev was a changeling. To build on Keith's thing, I was convinced Nechayev was a changeling.
Yeah,
which she wasn't. That's not what the twist was. Like I said, these two episodes did not stick with me the way some other Dominion stories will. I didn't love this second part. Partly because it focused so much on Odo on the planet, and as much as I love Rene Auberjonois, I don't love the story arc of him and his people, from the beginning to end. I just don't love it. And I also I texted you two that when I finished the book, I was in tears. And because of the rushness, they took out the impact that this story should have had. And it's primarily from Sisko's perspective and Kira's perspective what that impact is. In terms of Kira's always thought Sisko's a Federation man that's been a clash, and she cares about Bajor. And Sisko has to make some decisions. I know this is getting ahead of ourselves, but Sisko and Dax and O'Brien and Bashir make a decision to give up their careers to save Bajor, to do what's right. And in the book, they get a lot into Sisko's head about, am I willing to throw away my whole life for this? Yes, I am. This is important enough. This is what's right. And so that impact of getting his thinking and I only wish I had a chance to tell Kira why I did this she's smart, she'll figure it out. But she won't figure it out for 70 years because we're closing the wormhole and she's going to be trapped wherever she and Odo are, right? But it's very much a good culmination of their relationship and conflict, because I feel like after this, their conflict's kind of gone. They're now kind of on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Cisco fulfilling the destiny. Granted, he doesn't fulfill it now. We've got 5 more seasons of Deep Space Nine, but fulfilling that destiny of being the prophet to the Bajoran people and saving Bajor, it feels like that's what's happening, even though it's never explicitly said in the novel. So it kills me that this didn't actually happen. In fact, one of my 2 alternate episodes is the whole subplot that happens in their heads, even though I did not see a way out of it, and I was getting really racking my brain of like, how the hell did they get out of this? Okay, Nechev's a changeling and they're going to expose her, and that's how they get out of it? Like, I couldn't figure it out because I couldn't remember what the out was. I kind of wanted that whole thing to be real. I kind of wanted Cisco to have that moment where he's willing to give himself up, and then Kira to see that. Yeah.
My original one, and then I didn't come up with a better one, was, oh, there should be a DS9 revolt. And then there was, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, never mind. We got to fit it. Thanks.
I wanted to go back to the previous episode for a moment, because you mentioned something at the time that I didn't recall catching, and that's them setting up, well, the Chekhov's wormhole collapse, essentially, which I didn't. So for me, it was like, what, they can do that? When was the first time they brought that up? I mean, it feels like maybe they talked about doing that in prior seasons or something, but I mean,
I don't feel like they did, but this will not be the last time it's talked about.
I mean, is that something that's generally understood to be possible within Star Trek? Just that you can just shoot something and destroy a wormhole. I think.
Quite honestly, I'm not sure. I mean, I remember some things about the wormhole and things they discuss later, but I still don't remember if they can just shoot it to close it. Especially a runabout, which is not a super heavily armed vessel. That's a little bit of a plot hole for me.
Yeah.
But it was more like... Yeah.
The plot hole is sealed because of that device, which is, again, because, God, that line was so great. But I was momentarily confused. It really caught the 70-year thing. You mentioned that. It's like, well, they're gonna have to wait 70 years for reinforcements. I was like, what?
I was like, so are they going to change the opening of the show?
So honestly, there is something in a future season about the wormhole, but I started to think maybe that happens in this episode. It's not shooting it and closing it, but there was something that I was like, oh, is that what this happens? I didn't think so, and it's not. It happens later, but I was there was definitely a moment where my brain trying to figure out what the out was thinking of this other thing that happens later. So
funny.
It just is a shame that their sacrifice was for nothing. It really is. I hope Cisco writes it down in a report and Kira gets to read it. I know I jumped to the end, but oof.
Speaking of the beginning, I'll jump right to the beginning. So Odo's asking all these questions of his people, and Kira's like, "This isn't a police investigation." You know what? He's, as much as I was on his case last week, he's allowed to have some questions.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. How long have you been waiting? He just, I mean, are you kidding me?
I don't think that line was in the book, because that line really bumped me too.
Yeah.
I read the book ahead of watching the episode. I was like 2/3 of the way through the book when I watched part 1, and I finished the book before I watched part 2. And that, I don't think that line was in the book.
And while we're on that, how do we feel about the changeling effects of them coming out of the water and the joining hands and all that?
Absolutely the best they could have done for 1994.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you on that.
CGI was so new.
It also makes me think of the tar guy that killed our girl. I don't know if you guys remember Tasha Yar.
Who?
Tasha Yar, way back at TNG. It's been I'll send you something on it, but yeah.
I can't believe I never noticed it before. It's her name, like T Yar, like Tar T-R.
Oh no.
What?
Oh no! Oh no!
It was right there all along. They were teasing us.
I'm sure it's a coincidence, but
it's a whole anagram. They told
I'm never
us.
gonna be able to forget that now.
They told us.
Oh man!
I just love where that sentence ended up and just the way it was delivered. Like the whole, absolutely the best they could have done for 1994. Just
Yeah, the changeling
That's why he's so
stuff. We've seen the changelings briefly, or a changeling briefly in New Trek, and it's much better done. Of course it is. I'm itching for New Trek to actually deal with the changelings and Dominion in some way. I would really like it if they would. It would be great. Because, I mean, Next Gen's making films, and Voyager's going to be where Voyager is in a different part of the galaxy. But I can tell you, all the novels post Deep Space Nine from all the series are all like, we just come through the Dominion War, and that is hanging over every single story they tell. Like, this is gonna change Starfleet forever. I don't think we see Starfleet changed again like this until the burn in Discovery. This is a burn level event. Like, it's huge, but it's anyway.
Well, there's something I wanted to point out before we go too far. You both mentioned the problem of Odo's asking some good questions, and it's like, why are you shutting him down? And it runs. I always think of like Simpsons and Futurama is an example of this. They're a writing device where you want to give a character a chance to ramble through some things that the audience is thinking, and then not actually have to answer the questions.
Yeah.
So you have a character say, "Shut up," or "Hey, look at this distracting thing over here," and we're going to change the scene.
That's a very good point.
We get some terms right now that are going to be used pretty frequently throughout the rest of Deep Space Nine. For instance, the changelings call everybody that's not a changeling solids. That's how they refer to them.
I just kept writing. Every time they said that, I was just like, "Are we stripes or solids?
We're solids. We're solids." The Great Link is something that'll come up over and over again, which is essentially like all of the changelings in a cuddle puddle merged together.
That's the most cuddle ever. Yes.
There's a sexual connotation to the merge. When Odo and the female changeling do it, it's a little bit there. I think in future episodes, it's even more sexual whenever we see merging. But it's also a bit like the Vulcan mind meld, right? Because essentially what happens is they can read each other's thoughts and see what they're seeing without having to talk. That clumsy language thing. You just combine minds.
When did they establish that? Because I mean, shouldn't Odo have learned everything?
So that in terms of canon, to explain why he wouldn't know everything about the changelings after this, is it's a little bit more controlled than the mind meld, in that the female changeling is experienced in this and she can show him what she wants to show him. Sort of like a Vulcan that's done lots of mind melds versus a Vulcan that's new to it. One of them has better mental blocks that can like control the situation a little bit better. So the female changeling shows Odo enough, but doesn't show him everything. It's not a full mind meld.
So Iman is not one of these changelings.
Who? No, she's not. No, no connection. Different species of changeling. Okay. But that handshake merge was pretty heated. Just saying. Odo and Salome Jens, the female changeling. Yeah.
Did she say that they were about to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Because it just sort of like looked like they were going in for a hug, and then it started to look romantic, and then so I was like, oh, okay, I guess that just, yeah, it was. I could tell it was supposed to be unclear whether it was supposed to be affectionate or romantic or whatever, but they certainly didn't preclude that either. Looked like they were kind of like they were going in for a kiss, and then
something I think the novel did well. The novel, The Search by Diane Carey, which chronicles both episodes. Something I think they did well was basically all of the planet scenes on the Changeling planet were from Kira's perspective, which in the show, it's definitely not. Like, there's a lot of Odo-centric stuff. But I like, because it's such an alien environment, and Odo never expresses the things that he's thinking and feeling, because he's not very expressive. I like that they're all from Kira's perspective.
So, one thing I really enjoyed about this was just the sense of relief of them getting to explicitly Odo having been programmed to do the things that he was doing. That sense of, it's like, I needed that to just get past the the aberrant behavior in the first one, and he seemed to level out and even out just very much into the type of character or the things I usually like about him by the time the episode ends.
Old friend Admiral Alana Nechayev is back.
Admiral
Natalia Nogorich. I'm sure I said her name wrong.
Yep.
Admiral. She, I think I mentioned in Next Gen, there are times where she seems unreasonable and times where I kind of like her. And she's not an evil character, and she's not the obstacle that many original series Commodores were. But there are times where she doesn't agree with Picard. And this was awful. This was Commodore level obstruction bull BS with Nechayev in this episode. So I'm frankly relieved, mainly because despite those couple of Next Gen appearances, the main thing I know her from is the New Frontier novels, because she appeared in the New Frontier that you guys read. And I like her in the New Frontier novels. Like, I still don't always agree with her, but I like her. And so this was like, hey, yeah, how does that square with this? Come on. And the New Frontier novels, the first ones came out, I believe, in 96. So I'm like, how does this bit square with what is written later? But that's because it wasn't ever her. I still kind of like that they pulled Nechayev for it instead of an unknown admiral. I appreciate that.
Yeah, Admiral. This will surprise no one that knows me or listens to this podcast, but I found her just even more attractive the more obstructionist she was.
And from a Federation large perspective, you can see where she'd come down the way she came down, even though it was absolutely the wrong decision.
Yeah.
So
like it's the ideals versus the on the ground day-to-day logistics. It's narrow vision. She has blinders on.
And it starts with like, oh, okay, I get it. Starfleet wants to do this, and then it just kind of ramps up. But
quite honestly, it's the same decisions they made that for the Maquis. And that's again where I brought that up last week. This is the same type of thing. And that's an alternate way they could have gone, is if all this head stuff happened to end up being real, as I mentioned in one of my alternate episodes, Sisko and them join the Maquis from here on out. And the rest of the series, they're not Starfleet anymore. And that would be a very interesting way to go with it. It's not the way they go with it, obviously. But I can't help but wonder if that could be the show of seasons 3 through 7 and the Maquis. Or seasons 3 through 6 or 3 through 5, and then they make a deal with Starfleet and they come back in the fold and Starfleet does the right thing eventually. That could have been really cool to have them be rebels for a season or 2 or 3. Because they're right. We know they're right.
To Nechayev for a moment. It's just, that's one thing I liked about the way that the explanation played out, is that they were showing the type of hint that they were showing with her for her flat affect. It made sense, but with both explanations of it, thinking or them telegraphing that she might be a changeling, for example. I noticed that when they would have the scenes with her and one of the founders, who the people, the guy who we thought was a founder. Yeah, they both had that really weird, same calm demeanor and expression on their face while they're talking to Sisko about things that they're disagreeing with him on, and it was like, oh, that's why it looked like so much like she was a changeling there. No,
I agree with you, Keith. You're talking about Borath, who's played by Dennis Christopher, best known for Django Unchained, the original 1990s It, Fade to Black and Breaking Away.
Right.
I saw his name in the opening credits, and Breaking Away is one of my, it might not be in my top 10, but it might be in my top 25. And it includes Paul Dooley, who we've seen.
He'll be in DS9 coming up.
Yeah. And
we already saw him in DS9 once.
Oh, and Dennis Quaid, our friend from Enemy Mine. And that might be it. I don't think Jackie Earle Haley has a Star Trek credit.
I don't recall seeing Jackie Earle Haley, which doesn't mean he doesn't show up in Enterprise. Who knows? In terms of Dennis Christopher, he will do one episode of Star Trek Enterprise as a different character.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, those are only 2 Trek credits. He did episode 6 Feet Under, 5 episodes of Deadwood, a few things.
He's a good actor. I always like that guy.
So the thing I was trying to say there, though, is
no credits for the last 10 years. Sorry.
We broke away.
The way that it ended up, it made sense that it was a simulation, because this is probably how a simulation would present those emotions as well.
Yeah.
As far as not being able to capture the way that she would actually act or speak, for that type of disagreement.
Absolutely. Borath claims that the Vorta are the founders.
Right. Right.
Keith, did you remember that the Changelings were the founders, or were you buying the story?
I wasn't clear on what the Changelings' role were in the Dominion, so I was buying it to that extent. I didn't understand.
I would say in DS9 going forward, they're called the founders way more than they're called Changelings.
Yeah. So the terminology wasn't something I was familiar enough with to start to get. Well, I mean, I just assumed like maybe they were the real enforcers, or they were just members of it in some way, without it necessarily being there being that hierarchy.
Stephen, I assume you just believed it for the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you? There's no reason not to. Yeah, absolutely. I got so excited when Garrick showed up. He cautions Bashir about the treaty, which I guess is part of the programming of like, we need somebody that can be subversive to be part of the simulation. Love it. But talk about the Romulans being cut out. I mean, again, I think the book does this better of the politics of it. But yeah, if you're going to make a treaty with the whole Alpha Quadrant but purposely leave the Romulans out, then you're starting a war with the Romulans.
Yeah.
That's just, that's, if you know anything about the Romulans, you know that's true. It's so shady.
That's where it's sort of becoming so bizarre, and it's like the whole I kept again being distracted by, is Bashir a changeling? What's happening here? There's I'm looking for little holes in the pattern, and it's like, but no, but wait, he was on the ship with Cisco, who's definitely not, no, Cisco's definitely Cisco. That whole loop through everything.
Why did you think Bashir versus any of the others?
Well, no, just something about the way that the conversation was unfolding with Garrick in the hallway, the way the questions were being asked. I was waiting for him to actually volunteer information that said, yes, I know Garrick, and I know what our relationship is, without having to be fed this by Garrick as he's talking, because there's something about the way that, the way the information was presented. It was it was Garrick telling them what their relationship was, and Bashir sort of agreeing.
I just bumped on that you were singling out Bashir, but anyway, it doesn't matter.
It's more because of when it was taking place in the episode. It was fairly early on with them all getting back, and now I think the speed was like, wait, what's happening? Yeah,
I just think it's very interesting you focused on Bashir. I'm not going to say anything else at the moment.
Damn it! Oh, what did you?
I'm not saying anything. I just think it was very interesting you focused on it.
All right,
he has secrets.
I'm gonna stop thinking about it.
Yeah. Anyway, the changelings say their whole thing is they were acting back against speciesism, and that's why they created a whole dominion to protect themselves. Is that Israel fighting being awful to the Palestinians?
No comment.
Like, well, we've been persecuted our whole existence.
You have to get close to the micro. No, just no.
No comment.
Right. No. That just keeps coming up, doesn't it? I mean, just like the idea of, well, I mean, it's something that I didn't notice how often that sort of thing comes up until, of course, the Israel-Palestine, not conflict so much as the things, the genocide is. What's that? Man,
it's been going on for 70 years, but it's over now.
Right.
Trump did finally get convicted, and he did get impeached. We got those right.
Yeah. We're impeached twice. And convicted, even though he's not in jail yet.
Yeah.
I will say right now, the Israel-Palestine conflict is not over when this episode goes live. I would be willing to bet my life savings on it.
Yes. All right. My point is, I'm not right. I misspoke saying conflict. I mean the actual genocide part of what has been happening. But that is, it's made it clearer that, how many storylines present that problem.
Mm-hmm.
The good guys and bad guys, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whenever you actually have a war going, it's just whether you can call it a war or whatever. There's those shifts in power make it unclear who is actually.
Well, and this is very much we've talked about not only the Middle East, but the Bosnia, Herzegovina, the crumbling of Yugoslavia and all that stuff. Those civil wars going on over there, or I guess not civil wars because they broke down into several countries and factions, but those wars going on over there as well, which was around this time.
I have to say, Stephen, as an American, I don't pay attention to that.
Well, the Dayton Accords brought peace to the region. Somehow those were arranged in Dayton, Ohio, of all places. Nice. I was right around this time, I believe. So
anyway, the question I want to bring up, though, I mean, the point of all those kinds of storylines is there ever going to be a situation where it's very clear that one party has a right to just eradicate the other, and like they came so close to that for the Bajor things, and I think if it had happened in one stroke, you might be able to go, okay, well, the Kardashians were doing this and they just blew up the planet in retaliation. But
I mean, there's to my mind, and granted, I am privileged and do not have to face these decisions, but I just don't think there's ever any justification to eradicate, no matter what one side has done.
Right.
I just
What
don't
about
think
the
there's any
Jedi and the
justification to
Sith?
wipe everybody out because there's going to be innocents on any side.
Are there innocent Sith Lords? I don't think so.
Uh,
I think the Sith
No, but
wipe out.
I don't acknowledge that universe being real,
Mm.
which it's not. So I guess I'm okay on that regard.
And you can't tell me that there weren't some bullies in like the the Jedi Temple with the younglings.
Oh,
So,
There
some,
were
some,
definitely some
definitely
bully
were.
kids that
There
deserved
for sure
Anakin's
were.
Yeah.
lightsaber. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was hoping you'd go there, Keith. That was what I was thinking too. Oh my God. Not all of those children were innocent. Pluto is one of 100 changelings they set out to explore the galaxy to report back. Obviously, he was 300 years early because they didn't know about the wormhole, and they thought it would take him a lot longer to travel through space, which still implies that they're going at light speed or faster than light if 300 years before he can go all the way and then report back. Unless they didn't think he'd go all the way to Bayshore. They just like got a little bit and come back.
That aspect, and I didn't look this up, and I didn't even think about it until now. But so the original episode, The Changeling from the original series, was about Nomad who goes into space and comes back looking for the creator, and then Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which we love, also Voyager is looking for the creator. He's coming back looking for the creator, and Voyager was sent out for us to be like, hey man, we're here. What's going on? Hey, report back to us, which is what Voyager did. So I don't know that there's a direct line, but just the fact, changelings are changelings. But
that makes absolute sense. In Star Trek Voyager, instead of fighting the creator, fights the caretaker, which is essentially the same thing, right? Those two words are pretty similar.
Yeah.
The Voyager pilot is called caretaker. We'll get to that, but that's what I was referencing. We'll get to that in just a couple short months.
Yeah.
I love the Quark scene where he talks about the Jem'Hadar have the gambling dream, and then he gives this whole "I have a dream" speech. A second instance in 2 episodes of a white actor claiming the racism, like playing the racism card against.
I wouldn't really call that the racism card, and that's that.
So the racism card, I'm misspeaking there, but I think you get what I'm getting at. Of like, Odo's claiming speciesism in front of Avery Brooks, which bumps me for sure for a number of reasons, and then Quark doing the "I have a dream" speech, again a white actor, and I know there's a species level there too about Jem'Hadar and Ferengi and stuff, but it just feels like, I don't know. I will say this episode's story by white guys. It's a story by Ira Stephen Bear and Robert Hewitt Wolf again, same guys as the first one, and this time the teleplay was written by Ira Stephen Bear. So I have to think there's a certain level of ignorance of these white guys twice referencing racism in ways with white actors, trying to be like, we're so clever, we're applying it to species instead of race, but a little bit cringy from a modern perspective.
When you put it that way, I do sort of agree, but at the same time, I mean, that's what Star Trek is trying to do most of the time, is to every now and then point out, look how far we've come that we don't even notice this sort of thing, and this is now a new problem or a recycled problem that is, you know what I'm saying. That was, of course, that was the whole point too, was supposed to do the using defamiliarization to point out to the audience, like the white audience, look, this is how this problem works and this is how it could be solved, and showing them the shape of what is happening without having them centered in a way that they feel blamed. In other words,
I do think that the intentions were good. I'm not saying they weren't. I just think I think the first part was better handled. The second part, giving Quark the "I have a dream" speech, was played for comedy and not so well handled.
That's all right.
Guys, it hasn't showed up since last week, but if I had, I would point to my All Starfleet Matters after this conversation. But...
Well, let me use that phrase out of context again, and you could just steal my context.
And this is where
you said it was very different context than what you. Yeah. Anyway.
So Stephen at iabd.com.
Right. No, it still goes to Keith at iabd.com. It all complaints always go, even if you're not here, to Keith at iabdpresents.com. Sorry. O'Brien is injured in the bar fight, seemingly worse in the book, but we do get a little Keiko cameo in the bar fight after the bar fight of her being with him in the infirmary. It does suck that, of course, she's not there because she's never there. It's just a little bit sad. Feel like if he's injured, we should have seen her. But oh well. Dax is okay. So we get to the scene where Dax comes in to complain to Siska that she's being transferred to the Lexington, and then Starfleet's pulling out the DS9. I will say there is one line in the book that really bumped me, and I loved it about this scene where before Dax, Bashir comes into Sisko's quarters, and he rings the doorbell, and Sisko's like, "Doctor, what have I said about bothering me at home with work matters?" And I so loved and clung to that work-life balance. Granted, Bashir coming to tell him that the Romulans are being cut out and everything, totally worth interrupting his home life. But as a modern person who hates capitalism and our current economic system, I really liked that Sisko as a captain is like, work-life balance, when I'm at home with my son, it better be an emergency if you're bothering me. And it was! But it had better be. If it's less than an emergency, you don't bother me in my quarters with my son. We need to see more of that from other Starfleet officers, because up until now, up until Sisko, name me one other Starfleet officer that hasn't lived and breathed the job, that showed any work-life balance. None of the characters have.
Was it also a reference to doctors not making house calls and then somebody complaining when a doctor did?
It wasn't, but that would have been funny. No, it was not at all.
I'm going back a little bit. Actually, this is both. Is Kira paler this season, or have I just not noticed last? I don't know. Yeah, it just maybe
the lighting.
The hired, or that. Also, along those same lines, are there more stingers in this season?
Hopefully.
Or have I just not been noticing them in other seasons?
I did not notice an uptick, which doesn't mean it's not there. I just didn't notice it.
Well, there's I think there are more reasons to have stingers when you have wartime episodes, so to speak.
True.
So.
That's true. I have two TOS things here. One is I love the computer specificity. So when they ask a question, the computer is like, I'm going to tell you everything about it. I wish Google is kind of that way, but not really. Like, you have to tailor your search. But on the Enterprise, they're like, hey, what's the deal with World War II? I know what you want to hear. I'm doing TOS voice right there, but not the smooth vocal stylings of Magil Barrett. And then they talk about there's a power source 4 kilometers beneath the surface, which to me, that is such a TOS, not a reference necessarily, but so many of the computers and things were below the ground, the power source. We got to find a way to knock that out. I like that.
It definitely felt familiar. I agree. Yeah.
Since you mentioned that, the thing about the computer knowing, I guess theoretically we could consider that AI would have advanced.
I meant to lead with that. I know everyone badmouths AI, but come on, guys.
It's like, oh, I can guess what you probably want to know about this, given the situation. I've been paying attention to this, and this. Oh, you probably want to know.
Sure, it's going to enslave our ancestors, but look at all the extra time we're going to have in the meantime.
I love the post that's going around that says, I want AI to cook and clean for me so that I can focus on my art. I don't want AI to make AI to make art, so I have to do more work. Yeah. Anyway, so Dominion's going to take Bajor and Deep Space Nine in this treaty that they've come, and that Sisko's too late. It's already been signed. That's... Man, when they said it's already been signed, my heart dropped. Again, looking for an out, like how is this going to be invalidated? I know this treaty is not going to be a thing, but I didn't know how.
And then I think this is when Nicheo says, the Federation carefully weighed all the options before entering into these peace talks. I was like, when does that ever happen?
So, all right,
that's when I should have known it was a simulation.
Going back to something Jimmy said earlier, especially now at this point, you were comparing this to, say, what was it, the Maquis. Do you think do you really think it's realistic that Starfleet would have not sought inclusion for everyone possible? I mean, would they really have tried to exclude the Romulans and with the thought that, oh, we can just wipe them out with this alliance if we do this?
I think they would have tried towards inclusion, but I do think the Dominion just blew up a Galaxy-class starship in the season finale
Mhm.
without blinking. Like 3 of their little ships blew it up. And then apparently Defiant, which was their biggest weapon, went out there and got knocked dead.
Yeah.
Which again, I don't think it was so clear in the show. In the book, it ended up being like 9 Jemadars that took to get the Defiant knocked down, not just like 2 or 3. Like it was a lot tougher than the Galaxy class. But I do think like if Starfleet is facing an enemy that they know they can't beat, that they know they're going to lose to, and they're being asked to cut up the Romulans and seed this one system with this one planet that's refused Federation membership. I mean, I know Bajor, there are many factions in Bajor that want Federation membership, but the government itself has refused it, and there are other factions that don't want it. I could see Starfleet being like, okay, we're going to seed it. The wormhole's the bigger thing that bothers me they would seed, because that has such strategic importance. That's the one that I'm a little bit more like, oh, I don't know if Starfleet would seed the wormhole. But well, Bajor, I think they'd seed Bajor.
You actually answered my question early on, because I'd forgotten the most important provision, which is the Dominion is the one that requested that the Romulans be excluded. It would have been something like, well, yeah, let's just steamroll past. It was interesting. That makes sense too about Bajor, actually.
There is a big theme in the novel that I think barely makes it onto the screen about how when the Starfleet officers return to DS9, in the fake DS9 in their heads, that the station has changed significantly. That there's a lot more people on the station now, that there's a lot more tension on the station now. And I know that happens in their heads in the scenario, but I do think that is an actual shift in the station life from here forward. Like Deep Space Nine is fundamentally changed by it changed one step by the discovery of the wormhole, but it's changed even bigger leap by the discovery of the Dominion. They're no longer going to have people like wanting to sightsee there. It is like a war station, and people are coming in for purpose, not just to hang out. But I expect a lot more people in the station, and the station itself to change. So I kind of liked that theme in the book about like several of the characters commenting about this doesn't feel like the station we've been on for the last 2 years. It feels different. There was one line in the book I cracked up on where they described Deep Space Nine as being in deep space 9 stations out, which I'm like, that doesn't make sense by any logic. But I loved that line.
That's a lower decks level kind of comment, I would say.
The last note I have for the novel, and I still have quite a few notes for the episode, but it just solidified to me so much in this story that this is a Western. That DS9's on the frontier, they're facing threats, and they don't have the government or the settled territory at their behest. They're out here on their own. And again, I think that's yet reason number 723 why DS9's like the original series. Because in the original series, space wasn't as settled. They were a Western on the frontier. And DS9 is very much a Western on the frontier.
That's how Gene sold it. Was wagons of West.
And I think DS9 gets back to those roots. I think DS9 feels like a Western. Next Gen never did. In some aspects. There's many aspects of DS9 that don't feel like a Western, but there are some aspects that do.
Well, just wait till Voyager.
As they're taking off, Voyager never felt like a Western the way I thought it should based on its premise, but we'll get to that in a couple of months. Garrick dying in this episode, man, I feel like and then Tyrol died as well. And both of these, obviously, in the head fake episode. I feel like in the Next Generation, they would not hesitate to dust Tyrol, who'd been in 2 episodes, the previous one, this one, and Garrick, because he'd only been in like 2 episodes before this. I know he's going to be in a ton more in the future.
What?
But I feel like they would take a character like Garrick that they introduced like twice and we liked them, and then they just killed him. I think the original series of the Next Gen would not hesitate to do that.
Hasn't it been more than twice for Garrick, though? I mean, we've...
No, not yet. He was only
No way. Really?
Maybe 3? He was barely in the first couple seasons. He's in the other stuff. He's in the later stuff a lot more.
God, it did not feel like that. You're probably right.
I'm going to look it up right now to see how many he's been in thus far. But I think it's worth noting that is...
Maybe 4.
I think they were playing with our expectations at this point, that killing off those type of characters and other Star Trek you wouldn't blink, which made their deaths feel like they could be more convincing.
All right. See, I didn't think they were dead. I thought maybe they were stunned or something. I didn't really, I'm kind of used to there being. What's that?
That's what I was going with.
Yeah, I guess if
Oh,
I'm used to them being like disintegrated. If you want to make sure they're definitely dead, you know.
in the book, it was more clear they were dead. Terrell, they mentioned is dead. With Garrick, it was just like he's not coming with us, which was implied. And I did exaggerate slightly. He was only in one episode of season 1, but he was in 4 episodes of season 2. So this was his 6th appearance.
Yeah.
He has a lot more than 6 appearances going forward. Let me tell you.
It still feels
7 episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It still feels low when I think about it, I guess. But that's it. Or his appearances were impactful enough where it felt like he was. Yeah. Anyway.
From a mathematical perspective, he's in about 1 out of every 6 or 7 episodes, which has not been true yet. He's weighted more in the later seasons than the earlier seasons. But
yay, I got to it.
So we're starting season 3, so we're almost a third of the way through the series, but we are only 1/7 of the way through Garrick's appearances, roughly. So yeah, there's or 1/6 of the way. So yeah, he's going to be in a lot more later. Love Garrick, so much more to come. I would have been so depressed if they'd killed him, if they'd burned him right here.
All right, so several thoughts to get through. One, let's start with Cisco and Garrick. I loved that scene so much. Just that's the getting sort of like the best of both of them in that sense of like having those kinds of couch conversations and like the subtext and that whole we understand each other thing. But
So
that implies that the simulation was doing that though. Like it understood Garrick enough to do that, or had some impression of him from what the doctor and I don't know what they were doing or how they were accomplishing that with Quark too. So Quark's speech simulated, right? I mean, there's like the whole thing about the gambling and.
So Quark did not make the "I Have a Dream" speech. That makes it a little bit better.
But where were they getting all these things from, or where were they getting these amalgamations? I guess.
I assume the heads of the Starfleet officers they kidnapped.
It's interesting.
So 2 things about the scene with Cisco and Garrick, because I love that scene as well. I didn't have this in my novel section, but in the novel, it says Cisco immediately tries to dismiss Garrick in the Replomat, but the reason he stops is he looks up, and for the first time since he got to the station, he sees honesty in Garrick's face. And I loved that line. I thought that was so brilliant. And I think while we didn't get that said explicitly, I think Avery Brooks does a really good job of like, I'm going to blow you off. I look up, I look in your face. Okay, you can sit down. And that's that whole thing about we think so much alike, and then Cisco agrees with it. That foreshadows my favorite episode of Star Trek total of the entire franchise is a Cisco-centric episode that's heavily Garrick.
Nice.
I've talked about it before. We'll talk about it again. I'm not going to get into it deeper now, but Cisco and Garrick's relationship in this moment made me think of that. And I'm like, they set this up at least this early. That's a season 6 episode to get to that story later. They're just, you always think of Garrick with Bashir, justifiably so because they're lovers. But Cisco and Garrick and Bashir have a great relationship, but Cisco and Garrick's relationship is also very interesting because they're both willing to completely buck their cultures and their line of command structure to do what they think is right. I think there's a certain understanding there. I think by now, even trying to set aside what I know of Garrick in the future, I think by now I've already kind of come to respect Garrick a bit. I know this wasn't Garrick in this episode, but I think I get him enough to respect him. Of like, okay, you're going to make some decisions that don't personally benefit you, which was the first few appearances it implied he was just out for himself. Because he really is a patriot. He really loves Cardassia. And he will go against the Cardassian government to protect Cardassia. And I think that's really an interesting character trait that I dig.
Yep. It's still, you just maybe think again, and I'm sure this is going to keep coming up. Anytime we start to like a Cardassian character too much, we have to think about what did they actually do? How bloody were their hands? And those kinds of.
Garrick's hands are stained red, and he has a basement full of corpses. We just haven't gotten into that. And the show's always going to tease it and never get there explicitly. But I think I'm willing to go on a limb and say it's canon that Garrick was pretty freaking evil in his time. But he always did it for Cardassia. We haven't got into the relationship between him and Paul Dooley, and I think that's part of what colors. I think that's later this season. That's part of what colors my impression of him, and we'll get to that. But the relationship between Garrick and Paul Dooley is pretty cool.
Paul Dooley
Cisco
being an
breaks
actor, or
Yeah.
okay.
the Paul Dooley's character and Tane, how he relates to Garrick's backstory. I think is very
Oh, okay.
He's in Breaking Away with the guy that played Borat in this episode. Dennis Christopher. My wife.
Cisco's betrayal, all that started to feel really, really rushed. And again, maybe that's because I read the book first. Stephen, though, you said you felt rushed as well.
Well, I did like the pacing,
break out through the end.
Yeah, but it did feel like, oh, we got to get this all in this. Even though I know we're gonna be more of an arc, but they probably could have done it. Well, I guess they're gonna do 4 more seasons or 5 more seasons like this.
Yeah.
I don't know if rush is the right word, but jam packed maybe. Which usually I generally I don't mind, and like I said, I did like this episode a lot, but
I did too. It just felt like Cisco's holding the Romney, and then all of a sudden he's in a jail cell. All of a sudden they're breaking him out. All of a sudden he's in the runabout. All of a sudden they're like that needed a little more breathing space. They did a 3-parter to open season 2. Why couldn't they have taken a little more time to open season 3?
Sure.
I don't know. They may have started to feel like filler if they stretched into a 3rd part, but it needed more than the running time they got. That's why I like screening or streaming where you can do 44 minutes or 49 or 53. If this was Discovery or Stranger Worlds, this would have been a 59-minute episode instead of a 44, and that would have solved the problem.
Excellent points. I mean, it helped that you actually described the thing with Cisco and the brig and out, and I was because that definitely felt rushed. I think both fortunately and unfortunately, when you have those kinds of reveals at the end that they let you go, oh, okay, well, it makes sense because of this, or they literally could have in a simulation just jumped them like that without them even really feeling it.
Yeah,
but that could have even been like put forward as a hint.
Did you buy Garrick's betrayal for even a second when he turned his phaser on the Federation people?
No, that was great though. Did it seem like the Doctor was buying it?
Oh, it seemed like all of them were buying it. Cisco, Dax, and Bashir all looked betrayed. And honestly, I bought it in a way. Like, I knew Garrick's always playing 3-dimensional chess, but I bought it for a second because by that point I was like, something weird's going on here.
That was a great line though, too. Again,
it was good about.
Again, thinking about it, it's so the simulation is coming up with all these great one-liners and little quips. It's just like what, or just
come on AI, let's go.
That's what they're being trained for art. You know, they need to be able to do things like this later. Of course, then you can also make the argument that they're pulling this from Cisco's head or something, and he's got all these quips lined up for Garrick to be saying. So I don't know.
Or Bashir's head. I mean, Garrick's whole line about, oh, you caught on to the plan where I bring them to you and then I shoot you.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was talking about. Just like that was just
good.
I can't imagine.
I do think, and this is part of the feeling of rush, if Garrick had really died, even after 6 episodes, you dwell for half a second. You don't just run and leave. I was a little surprised when we got, very surprised because I didn't remember the twist, when Odo and Kira got into the room and we saw Cisco, Dax, O'Brien, and Bashir and Tyrol, because Defiant had more people than that. Where's the rest of the crew? Did they kill everybody else? And these are the only survivors they took captive?
Perhaps.
That's the impression I got, is everybody else in Defiant is dead. And if Quark had not left, he would be dead now. So it's a good thing they let him get off the ship in episode 1.
Definitely, I'm sure on TOS, but definitely on TNG, there was an episode where there was super beings that were doing a test and they killed a couple people. And it's like, can you bring them back since you're so was it necessary to kill them to do the test?
Had to be convincing.
Yeah. So
but I'm pretty sure. I wish this episode had given one line of confirmation, but I'm pretty sure they killed the rest of the crew.
Right. I'm not sure.
Maybe they're still on the ship.
The ship that's floating dead in space?
Well, they beamed up there somehow. They're talking to someone. Maybe
they're in a different room but they're hooked up to other stuff.
No, do you remember they let them use the communicators and they called up to somebody to beam back up to the ship? So
I thought they just called the automated runabout.
You can do that?
A shuttle, yeah.
Huh.
The shuttles and runabouts have automation that you can beam down and then call it to call you back up.
when Kira and Odo beamed up.
Yeah.
No, before that though. Remember they had 5 to beam up. Cisco was talking to someone.
Was 5 to beam up in the simulation, or was that?
No, that was after they got
that
out.
was after that was after they got out.
Yeah,
Because I have a question. How do they know which 5 to beam up? I think I've asked this before.
They were. I've thought about that too. They were clustered together. That would be the AI going, okay, you mean this, or maybe whoever's manning the controls assumes that.
Just cut the line for Cisco's line. Yeah. Now that is a good point. It does feel more like a situation where maybe they left some crew alive and they're talking to a transporter operator rather than an automation.
Yeah.
I don't know. Twist! Changelings are the founders. I know Keith didn't find that surprising. Steven, did you find that surprising? The changelings were the founders?
I don't think I did at that point. I was like, no, I'll buy this. Yeah.
Wait, so what? So what? So many questions. I'm trying to remember. Like what have you watched, Steven? I'm not sure I understand. Like, how did I thought you knew more about this than you did apparently.
Oh no, I've never seen any of these.
Was it Odo standing up to his people about like basically whatever you do to them, you have to do to me? And we find out that no changeling has ever harmed another. That is a major plot point in the future. So take note of that.
Interesting.
So that's just the thing. Like they'll send the Jem'Hadar to kill everybody, but they don't harm each other. That's a red line for them. I like that Cisco trusts Odo when they beam up and leave Odo. After everything that's happened, Cisco's still like, okay, you're gonna stay here. That's fine. We'll meet you upstairs. I think that's nice. That's a testament to the last couple seasons.
Upstairs.
Yeah. I liked the female changeling telling Odo, "You'll miss us even more," or whatever. I think that was her saying that, but that's a good line.
Yeah, it was, and I liked that too. It was I agreed with her too, so that was.
And then Kira grabs Odo's hand before they beam up, which is,
and that's a callback to him melding with
female changeling.
Yeah,
I hadn't thought of it that way.
I hadn't either.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Okay.
And it looked real. Those effects looked perfect. Like, I believe.
You believed Rene Auberjonois was holding Nana Visitor's hand?
I do believe
that they were beaming up.
Yes.
My other alternate episode was just that this actually connected to the chase and was part of that story arc. But I did want to mention there is a first-time Star Trek DS9 director this week. Did you see the name in the credits?
Yeah, Jonathan Frakes.
Jonathan Frakes.
Nice.
Which boggled my mind a bit because I'm like, weren't they filming Star Trek Generations right now? But maybe he had a week there where he wasn't even on set because there's a lot of scenes he's not in. Jonathan Frakes directs episodes of most Star Trek shows. I mean, he's done the Orville, he's done Discovery, Star Trek Picard, Strange New Worlds. I don't think he's done the animated. I don't think he's done Lower Decks or Prodigy. But he did the Strange New Worlds with the Lower Decks people. He did that one. He did feature films, but he will direct Voyager, but he'll only direct 3 Deep Space Nine episodes, and they're all in this season, which I thought was interesting because he's like the go-to Star Trek director for really a lot of the franchise after this.
Yeah.
But he only does 3 seasons of season 3, and that's it for DS9.
I didn't realize. I didn't realize he was directing this one. I was going to say you need to ask him to be a guest director in IABD at some point.
I mean, if he wants to.
I thought, what does a shapeshifter need with a door? I thought that
that was great.
That occurred to me as well.
Another good Cisco father-son scene. I enjoyed that.
Ooh, also simulated. And it was interesting seeing Cisco's reaction. Like he started to realize something was wrong with the way that Jake was talking when he said that. That you tell me.
That's a good point. Yeah.
It was like he was like, what? What's going? And then it's like, nope, distraction.
I mentioned this earlier, but I wrote, great, a test. But it makes sense in this instance. It does make sense. And I'm not sure.
Instead of a test where there's any consequence for the people being tested, it's a test we're just figuring out who you are, which I think is a different method than what the original series did with testing.
I mean, they usually stated the purpose of figuring out who you are for those other things, but it seemed like the stakes were different is all. Yeah,
the stakes here were just like, we're trying to figure out if we're going to fight you and how we're going to fight you. There's no right or wrong answer. We're still going to let you leave at the end. Well, they wouldn't have had Odo not been there. But like, it was very much
strategy.
We are going to fight you. There's nothing you can do to pass the test so we don't fight you. It's just what is the best method of fighting you.
This was better than the one with the light beings came to the station and
Yeah, this was just probing their defenses. That sort of testing.
I don't know. Wait, but it felt like they were saying something to the effect that no, I don't know. It was something about the way they phrased it. Like, how far are you willing to go to stop us?
But seeing if there was a peace treaty to be had, if they started with sacrifice enough for them to not have to fight them.
Okay, so I mean, I think there might have been a pass fail, maybe kind of. I don't know, but
if Starfleet was willing to just roll over and hand them stuff.
But I agree with the shape of that premise, though. The idea that this was something different than testing your morality or something like that, or how good you are, or whatever, whether you're a worthy species of this thing or enlightenment was much more of a what are we going to do?
Yeah.
The way the crew members who were in virtual reality or whatever were in there, and just the idea of the Dominion and all this stuff, very Matrixy to me. Very Matrixy. Which is yeah. This is 5 years ahead. It doesn't seem like it now. This is just 5 years before the Matrix comes out.
I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, that trope really wasn't there of being in pods and have we seen there had to have been mind simulations in Star Trek. Yeah, there TNG. Well, we've been through the entire run of that, and there were things like that.
Yeah. So that was my last note.
Let's get to the rankings then. Who was your shady character of part 2?
This is tricky because of all the fakeness, but mine is Fake Eddington when he's just such a jerk about everything. Because I can't choose Nemchea because she's just my girl. But yeah, Fake Eddington.
He was.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm calling the Dominion, which I guess I said changelings last week and sort of the same thing. But running the simulation and all that, that's pretty shady.
That is shady.
You could just talk to them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to pick one of the characters within the simulation like that, like the Admiral, as you were saying, because it really did feel literally like. But no. I don't know. Maybe the female changeling.
Female changeling, really? Okay. I mean, I don't think she was the whole ringleader of everything yet, but I think she's more the spokesperson than the ringleader.
Well, yes, but I mean, her having to interact with Odo and Kira in that way, and then also just have that whole thing going on right there, and it was just almost seamlessly transitioning between, well, yep, we are doing this, and no, I didn't tell you about it. Now what? Kind of, I don't know, something. Just
Okay. Who was your annoyance this week?
Staying within the simulation is that jerky Jem Hadar guy who started the fight or whatever.
Oh yeah, that's a good choice.
It was
Jem Hadar that beat up O'Brien.
What? Stop hitting yourself. Essentially, that's what
I don't know if that's Jem Hadar officer played by Christopher Doyle or one of the others, but I'll just put Jem Hadar that beat up O'Brien.
Yeah.
And that makes so much more sense now too. I forgot about another simulation of like, hey, what happens if we do this?
Well, and O'Brien in his head got the crap beat out of him and he survived and he remembers being beat the crap out of. So yeah. I am actually going to go with Bortus, the Vorta. He really annoyed me.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty solid choice.
Yeah. Borath, I mean, I guess.
Right.
Which is the Klingon moon, where they have the time travel stuff, isn't it? So you have the same name as the Klingon moon with the fire caves and the time travel? Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. The Borath Monastery. Oh, it's spelled Boreth instead of Borath. Sorry. Close enough that it's essentially the same name.
And you also
so Keith, are you going with Borath as well?
Actually, I think I'd rather go with the bully and the
Jem Hadar that beat up O'Brien.
Even though he's fake. It's funny you said Bortus at first too, which of course is from
the Orville.
The Orville,
yeah. Who are you having a drink with?
Bortus. I'm sorry.
You mean Borath?
No.
What, Steven?
The Chev.
Okay.
Yeah. Admiral.
But she wasn't even real.
That's okay.
You want to have a drink with the real one while she's reading the report about the fake one?
This is where it gets tricky. I'm tempted to go with fake Gareth, I guess, or Garrick.
Gareth?
Gareth. I just did Gareth. Garrick.
Now you think of The Office, the British Office. No, I'm going with Odo. He's going through some stuff.
But he doesn't eat or drink, I think he said, right? So
He doesn't, but I'm still going with him. I'm still going with him.
all right. Now,
I
actually,
felt much more sympathy for him in part 2 than I did for part 1. He was my annoyance last
No.
week, but in part 2, I got him.
no, I'm going to change my answer then because I thought to myself, well, he doesn't eat or drink, so no, that's what I would have gone with.
Odo?
Yeah.
Ranking the episode below part 1, right?
I actually liked it better, but that's
Ooh.
you know.
Okay, I guess Steven's the tiebreaker because
I think it was the sense of relief that came with a lot of these things going, oh, okay. And especially Odo, especially the saving his character, just kind of like, all right.
But well, to me, the show is Cisco, and it comes down to Cisco. And I thought the first episode was like, he's so well developed now. He's the Cisco I know and
Ooh.
love. But then in the second episode, the good stuff that where he made me cry happened in the book, which I read first. Maybe that was a mistake. And then
I
the
think that's what
show, it felt so rushed. I thought his character was cheated. So that's where I think the first is far superior.
But then you have the Cisco and Garrick scene, and then also
That's a great scene.
also them giving Garrick that line probably from their heads. So that's
Okay. Steven, is it going above or below?
that's a,
The disparity isn't as much for me as for you guys. I think I'm still gonna go with the first episode, but I thought this was one of the better of the, like I said last week, I think, of the 2-part episodes or 2-episode whatever arcs. Especially since the last several from TNG we were always disappointed. I feel like after Best of Both Worlds, it was always like,
It's an interesting point,
Love
actually.
part 1. I was very lukewarm on part 2, so I'm going to be tempted to put a lot of episodes in the middle of these 2 parts, but we'll see how that ends up panning out.
Fair enough.
This I don't know. It felt more balanced. I mean, to me, it felt more balanced than most of them, as you were saying.
Well, you
just
lost, Keith. Part 1's number 1, part 2's number 2, and you can deal with it.
No, it's fine. No, seriously, I'm just saying that it felt more, I don't know, cohesive.
I think I get your point. I really do. I think the book is part of why I got spoiled, and I think it's very hard to separate what was a really brilliant Cisco plot in part 2 of the book versus how that part got really cut down for the screen. It's really hard for me to separate those feelings. So
I know how that goes.
anyway, next week we're gonna be in DS9 for like the next 8 to 10 weeks. But next week, House of Quark. About time, because Quark was barely in these episodes. Quark is forced to marry a Klingon widow after he takes credit for the accidental death of her husband, the head of a powerful Klingon house. So Quark and Klingons get excited.
That feels like
Until then,
it gave away a lot.
Live
Didn't it?
long.
Everyone and prosper.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's got the time?